Today's recording is on the tried and true practice of shared writing. We'll briefly cover some of the very foundational and very important skills students absolutely need to be successful in writing. We will understand the connection between the gradual release and scaffolding students in their writing, and I'll give you an example of what shared writing can look like. Why do more students dislike writing more than reading? Well, let's just kind of think about it for a minute. Students see readers every day, perhaps multiple times a day. We read aloud every day to students, but do we write aloud? They watch us read, they hear us pronounce hard words, they hear us say big vocabulary words, and they see us thinking aloud. But when do students see the how of writing? If we can teach with this thought on the slide in mind and think, just as we have students read for enjoyment, look at books for enjoyment, flip through books, listen to audiobooks, watch YouTube videos of stories being read, so should we be finding ways for students to see us and others write for enjoyment, choose writing, and see the how of writing in action on a daily basis. Here are some foundational skills that we as teachers really need to consider, no matter the age or the grade of our students. Are you familiar with the cognitive processes that we use when we are writing? What are those skills that students actually need in order to be fluent writers? As you can see on the slide, there are two areas here that are vital. Benson Ramsey have done a really good job in their Layers of Literacy website of explaining a little bit about how important composing and transcribing are and how they work together. So in composing, students need to be able to plan and generate ideas. And then on top of being able to do that, they need to know how to form the letters. They need to print, perhaps handwrite, cursive, phonics skills, spelling, morphology, and understanding how to determine the spelling of some words, and word order. So if you think about those two things that probably most of us now are taking and we don't really think about anymore, and because they are so automatic. But when you're first beginning to write, these are things that students are going to need to work on and be able to start learning how to do in an automatic form, in an automatic kind of way. So writing involves not only stringing all of your words and sentences together, but also to develop and express thought and ideas in a neat, orderly way. When teaching grade 1, I observed my students who really disliked writing, but I also began to notice with some of those students that they weren't able to kind of keep and hold that idea in their mind. They weren't able to hold the sentence that they came up with long enough to get it written. There were so many things when I really observed some of these children that weren't automatic. For some of them, it was actually holding the pencil, trying to get it into the way they were told to hold the pencil. And then by that time, they have forgotten what their sentence was. Or they would start writing their sentence and forget how to spell a certain word or where to find that word so that they could write it down. Some of them were not very fluent to even consider the idea of just writing the sounds down so that they could get that flow and their thoughts of some of their thoughts down, and even some of the basic way that they could possibly do it. So I found that with these students, there was a lot of frustration and a lot of lacking in that automaticity. So if we look then, as to what we do and what is automatic to us, even when it comes to typing on the computer, sometimes I find, and maybe not for everybody, but I love typing, and typing I can get I get ahead of myself in my thinking. But for a lot of the children, it's like, especially when they're learning how, and if they're struggling in higher grades, it might be that transcribing process that they're struggling with, where they just get so hung up on one aspect where they don't know where the words are, or they don't know how to spell them, or they get hung up on that idea that they can't spell them, or they're so anxious about the punctuation and they don't know where punctuation goes. There are many things that might hold a student up in being fluent in their writing. So let's look at shared writing. What is it? Before we go there, though, I wanted to bring up a quote by Fisher and Fry. I love these two for the longest time, and I'm not sure if they still are or not, but in writing all the books that they have written, they were also in the classroom teaching. And so for me, they're very authentic in that a lot of their experiences were what they were embracing in their writing. So regardless of the theoretical orientation, we have to agree that learning requires interaction. And I hope as teachers, we don't forget that even when it comes down to a basic skill like writing, which isn't so basic when you think of those cognitive processes, students are going to learn much better if we can somehow provide some interaction so that it becomes an action-oriented experience with, for example, with the teacher even, or with peers, and it's not something that's passive. And especially while we're learning, but eventually it becomes an independent activity. So if we look at this slide here, what I've done is I've kind of brought together sort of two ideas: the gradual release of responsibility plus the sharing, composing, and transcribing. So if we look at gradual release, and if you're familiar with it, you know that it is something that starts off with some explicit instruction, it's modeling, then we are sharing with the students, and then we're guiding them, and then we are releasing them to try some of the skills that we have worked with them on in an independent way. The research is really clear that this process actually lowers cognitive load for students. It is very supportive in scaffolding. So when students are learning how to write, it's a good idea if we can somehow embrace this strategy into teaching students writing, so that when they are coming into the process of composing and transcribing, or we're teaching these things with them, that we can actually be sharing the experience with them so that they're not on their own initially. We are modeling and thinking aloud what it means to come up with and to write a sentence. So really, shared writing, in my mind, is a combination of the gradual release and the sharing of the composing and transcribing with students. I just wanted to include this model here that I came across from an Australian website, which I will have included in the resources list at the end of the PowerPoint. But they've embraced Rosenshine's principles of instruction, where it is nicely depicted in this graphic, where, you know, and I like at the bottom where it summarizes, where we build the field, right? I do it and you watch. Well, I'll do it, but you help me. And this is kind of where that shared writing falls in, as well as the next one where it says, you do it and I will help you. The shared writing, in my mind, is very much the joint and the supported practice, where together we are writing. And then once you are doing most of the writing, I'm going to support you in that. And then eventually students move into the independent practice, and then the share and the reflect, where we talk about the experience. But again, it's not a linear thing. We're going to find, and you're going to find with, especially in elementary school, that you're going to be hopping back and forth between, you know, many of these columns. But right now we're going to look in this short video on the joint and the supported practice. So shared writing then is that opportunity for students to really be a part of that jointly constructed written text. And within the experience, they work and participate with the teacher to learn skills that maybe have already been explicitly taught or we want to reinforce. So it's that in the moment teaching sometimes as well that will really bring across some of those skills and hone in on them for the students. So the teacher in the experience might act as the scribe to start with. The teacher's the one that might also help prompt the students and think alouds and may question students as we're thinking of what to write. The teacher then supports the students as text is shaped and constructed. So we're also supporting them in the letter formation or sentence construction. And in older grades, it could be paragraph construction or paragraph organization. The students are actively contributing to that construction. So not only may the teacher be facilitating and beginning the process, but the teacher brings the students into the process of actually writing the text to where the pen is actually being shared. So the teacher and student then can also work together and talk about and question what is making sense. Can I read that word? Is it spelled properly? Did I leave spaces between my sentence? Does that sentence make sense? So the nice thing too about shared writing, it's something that can be done as a whole class, which I used to do a lot of. I would also do shared writing in small groups, and I have done it one-on-one with students who may have needed that, third round of support when it came to certain skills. Students then in this process can really clearly see how text is constructed, especially if we're doing lots of thinking aloud. And as a teacher, we want to be very deliberate as well in making those connections to reading and writing, because when you write something, then we're going to read it, and that's where we determine if it makes sense and others can read it. So really the key word be in this whole process is that co-construction, where we're implementing the gradual release so that we can scaffold our students and they're part of the building of writing. So the what and how. Okay, in shared writing, am I supposed to teach? Well, this is where we go and look at the curriculum. And what I've done is just a quick summary of the writing expectations in the Alberta education curriculum, the new curriculum. So you'll find that in every grade from kindergarten to grade 6, there are similar themes or categories throughout. And those are the writing process, creative writing, research process, and then different methods or ways of creating text. In the next slide here, we're going to see I've highlighted where those keywords are. So the top row under each grade are the outcomes. These are what the students must master by the end of the year. Then I've highlighted some of the KUSPs that go with those learning outcomes down below. And you'll see that the writing process is like highlighted pretty much all the way through, but looks a little bit different for every grade and is actually built upon. So we can see if those lighter yellow pieces that I've highlighted are really good examples of what can be used in a shared writing lesson. In kindergarten, we're going to be looking at how we can create messages, or how messages are shared through pictures, symbols, letters, words, and scribbles. And that can be done in and while doing a reading aloud, where we're talking about the author and who wrote the book and how did they write and how their messages make sense to us, not only in the words that maybe we can't read yet, but in the pictures. And then we have students do some independent practice with drawing their own pictures and telling us their story. In grade 1, we're looking at helping students write complete sentences and making sure that they're complete thoughts. And I've had experience with that in a shared writing lessons weekly with my students on really talking a lot about if our sentences make sense and if it is a complete thought. And that example I will show you near the end of the PowerPoint. You can see that in grade 2, lots of opportunity then to share a lesson or a shared writing lesson with students on, okay, now we know how to write sentences, but let's make sure they're not running on. And how do we organize those sentences? In grade 3, we're moving on to the next level, where now we're looking at the construction of paragraphs and making sure that our paragraphs make sense and are on one topic. In grade 4, we're going now another level where we might be then looking at specifics to a paragraph, like good topic sentences. We're looking at really good concluding sentences. Grade 5, we are looking at making sure that our communication is clear, that we are addressing purpose and audience, that we are aware of main ideas and organizing our ideas and how we go about doing that. That can be an excellent shared writing lesson, how we model organizing our ideas in a paragraph. And then in grade 6, we can excellent opportunities here to do a shared writing lesson with students on organizing our essays or to enhance our personal style. So those are just sort of like snippets throughout the curriculum on where there's so many opportunities for us to do a shared or plan a shared writing lesson with students to ensure that our outcomes are being completed. So I've given you, by looking at the curriculum, just some examples of what it can look like in Division 1 and Division 2. And if we just look at modeling the writing process, there are all of those components to the writing process that can be so easily embedded into our shared writing lesson, where it comes to how do we teach kids to plan? Are we using certain graphic organizers? How do we help them draft? not only providing them those worksheets that will guide them, but what's the thinking in the shared writing experience. We can model the thinking through on coming up with those wonderful ideas. And then again, also with the revising, editing, and what our published piece might look like. So in Div 1, I have an explicit example there called co-constructing student news, which I will share with you later, but it's also that whole writing together what perhaps later on might be letter writing. How do I write a letter to the principal that I would like a new swing set kind of thing, right? So that could be something done as a shared writing or a class writing. And also, you know, in Div 1, we're doing lots of shared experiences with the students on how to write good sentences, how to write great paragraphs, and how not to forget to use punctuation and which punctuation, spacing, and spelling. In Division 2, we're looking at some skills that are built upon from Div 1. Small group writing might be where some of the focus might be, where we're having students in smaller groups and we're working on different strategies and skills that different groups of kids might need. We might be modeling to the whole class and doing a shared writing on the smart board where everyone is participating in revising. We're looking at how we might revise, and we're modeling that and thinking aloud how we could make, say, a paragraph sound better and be more focused. Mini lessons on sentence writing, paragraph writing, essay writing, and of course, shared writing experiences on how to select words that are much more effective, how to ensure that perhaps in the piece of writing that we're working on has voice as well as organization. So here's the grade 1 example. Every Tuesday with my grade 1 students, we would write news. And so every Tuesday I would have 5 students share the news. So every child would eventually get a turn. And I just had a notebook or a studio scrapbook about the size that you can pick up at Staples or whatever, and cover it and call it like the grade 1 news. And all my students would sit on the floor, we'd open the book, we would write the date at the top of the page. And then I would go to the first students and say, okay, Johnny, what's your news for today? Do you have something you'd like to share with us? And Johnny might say that he got a new bike. And so on Friday, so then I would repeat and say, okay, so I'm thinking, Johnny, we're going to write this sentence because it will have your name in it because it's something you did. And I'll say, Johnny got a new bike on Friday. Johnny, what do you think? Is that going to be a good sentence? Do you think we should write that one? Okay, awesome. So I'll say it again. Johnny got a new bike on Friday. So I'm kind of modeling, holding, and repeating what my sentence is, how I'm composing the sentence. So I'll say, okay, let's write it down. But Johnny, you know what? I'm not going to write your name. You know how to write your name. You come and write your name in the news book. So Johnny would come up, write his name. And then I would model, okay, Johnny's the first word in our sentence. We've got to leave a space before we write the next word. Johnny got a new bike on Friday. What's our next word? Got. Johnny got. And I would point to where we're going to write the word got. How do we spell got? Does somebody know how to spell the word got? And we would just go on from there. And I would have kids come up and write the letter G or write the whole word got, or maybe it's a word that we had up on the word wall. One of the children will go point. We can spell it correctly because it's up on the word wall. And again, we would go through the sentence that way. And it would, take a while, but I'm modeling, repeating the sentence so I don't lose what I'm composing, but I'm also modeling how do I write these words down. And then we go back and we look, okay, did we leave the spaces? Did we leave, did we have a capital at the beginning of Johnny? Did we put a period at the end? And the really neat thing about this experience, by the time you have all 5 children share what they want to write, and we've co-constructed the news for the day, that this book eventually became something that the grade 1 students would literally fight over when it was a time to read independently, because it's something they all participated in. They love reading, again, something about themselves or their friends. And nice example of how that reciprocal relationship between what we wrote on Tuesday and what they are going to be reading later on in the day in that book and reading the next day until we add another page to our news example or our news book. So that's sort of like one example of many of a shared writing experience with students, where I am addressing the learning outcome of creating messages through the application of the writing process. My understanding that I'm dealing with there is that ideas and information, these are the students' ideas and information, is shared through written messages. And are the knowledge, skills, and procedures that I'm addressing is that the messages can be written in sentences that contain a complete thought. And so those three things I'm repeating over and over and over again in that simple process of creating a news book and writing in it every single Friday. Now, some of you who teach older grades might say, well, that's a really good grade 1 example, but a little bit childish for older students. You can do the same thing with paragraph writing. You can get the students started by doing a shared writing on a paragraph, or maybe sentences that students may want or have come up with that should be included in a paragraph, and then you work together on organizing the sentences and tweaking the sentences so that they are being communicated more clearly. And you can do that on the smartboard. You wouldn't necessarily need a news book for the kids to all read later, but if it's even in a on the smartboard and maybe later in some digital form that the students can go back and read, it might be something that they can all reread in their spare time, come back with some other ideas. There's just so many creative ways that you can do a shared writing experience with students, no matter what grade they are in. And of course, just very, very quickly, part of the process of writing involves editing and revising. And you could do a whole shared writing lesson. And again, it could be a 10-minute shared writing lesson, working with students on a piece of writing that doesn't necessarily have to be a student in the class. It could be something that you just made up, or it was a student from a previous year. The name is whited out. And together as a class, you are using a selected edited checklist as you are teaching the kids to learn how to edit their own. So this could be a Div 1 checklist. You could even then do a shared writing if you're teaching older kids on going through this together and doing a shared writing experience where they're editing, so that they know what to do when they are going through and editing their own writing, or if you are allowing some peer editing experiences. And this is just the initial beginnings to a revising checklist that I'm pulling together and we'll be sharing on the ARPDC website. But again, revising is different from editing, and lots of students have a lot of trouble with revising. And so this, to me, if I were teaching grade 3 to 5 or 6 right now, this would be something I would do shared writing experiences for sure with students, in going through together with them in a shared experience on how do I revise. I, as a child, don't remember ever having an experience of where someone helped me or my class in revising some writing. It's more difficult. So to do many examples with the students as a shared experience would be, I feel, very helpful for some students, because where do you begin when you've got this whole page of writing? Where do you begin with revising? So if we were to sum up a little bit here before I just go into one other aspect, when we're sharing the writing, what is the teacher doing? Well, she or he is modeling the repeating over and over and over. They're showing the students how to hold that sentence in their mind so that they can transcribe it and write it down. The teacher is modeling the demonstrating and thinking aloud and prompting and facilitating. She and he is involving the students in actually writing the words, modeling where to find them if they're not sure how to spell them. The teacher is involving the student in creating sentences and supporting them and ensuring they make sense, helping them with their ideas. The teacher is modeling all those different important parts to writing a sentence, the conventions of a sentence, grammar. But the teacher is not the one that's necessarily coming up with the sentences. This should be something the students are doing, and she or he is helping the student with coming up with good sentences and making them better, or paragraphs if they're older children. The teacher is also not doing all of the writing. The students are involved. A quick note on assessment. If you go to the ARPDC Professional Development Consortia website, you will see that there is some documents that are being uploaded. And so far we have K-3 documents, and they're called CPAR. They are the Curriculum Planning and Assessment Resources, and one for each grade, kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3. This is the grade 3 example here, and you can click on the PDF, and once you go to the PDF, there are links to I'll just take you there. There are links to little mini assessments. So if you are in writing and you click on writing and scroll down, you will see that there is a little box for every understanding in the writing piece, writing organizing idea for kindergarten to grade 3, and you will find checklists of writing for all year long, for all the understandings. And for this one understanding, we are looking at create written text. So if I were to click on that, it will take you to a rubric where this is the understanding, and then these are all of the KUSPs right out of the curriculum, the knowledge, skills, and procedures that can be assessed. And so you can do one of these for each student if you like, and give feedback for guidance to the students. So these are teacher documents. They're for you to use, and they are directly connected to the curriculum. All right. So the key points not to forget as we conclude this PowerPoint and this session, we know writing isn't easy for students, and that and we've learned that there's a cognitive load for writing that we really need to be aware of, and that's that transcribing, composing component. The gradual release of responsibility is a way to share with students that transcribing and composing experience so that they become stronger and independent, more independent in their ability to write. It allows students to be part of a process so that they're not just given an experience and expected to go and run with it if they're not sure of all the angles and pieces that are involved. This provides them that opportunity to actually see and be a part of and experience the writing experience with somebody who can support them. And it's another point that I wanted to add on here. All the research, and Stephen Graham is one of those. He's got many, he's got books and articles out there. And I highly agree with him that just like we need students to be reading every day, we really do need students to be writing every day. And that's how they get better.